I'm going to mute all just for background noise. If you want to ask anything, add anything, please do. Just you need to unmute yourself first. Okay. Okay, so this coming week's Torah portion that we'll be reading this coming weekend, this coming Shabbos, begins with Moses telling the Jewish people, and just to frame again what we discussed, is that this fifth book of the Torah is really, collectively, it's Moses' farewell address to the Jewish people. It happens in the last, I guess we can call it 37 days of his life, 5 weeks or so of his life, and he is going to pass away and be buried in the desert. And they're going to be, they know they're going forward to the land of Israel. They're going to be leaving the desert experience, leaving the miracles they've been living on, manna, protection, so on, to settle in Israel and build farms and agricultural society, have businesses, and have to deal with what we call real life, because their time in the desert, the 40 years in the desert, have really been a cocoon of that's off the run. That's not real life. Their manna, their food is delivered to their door. They're leading a life where there's a very strong supernatural bent, and now they're about to enter into the natural. And the Torah portion begins. Moses tells the Jews that they have to set up, when they get to Israel, set up a proper judicial system, which makes sense. Any functional society really needs a judicial system. And Moses drives home that it has to be a fair and just judicial system. Now, when I get into it now, and I'll have a split screen, and we'll get to sources. A judicial system, by definition, deals with anything that's judicial. That means if someone steals an apple, or if someone goes, God forbid, someone gets murdered. It's a broad range. And all of that has to be fair and just and principled. Even if it's a tiny crime, it doesn't make a difference who the defendants are. It has to be, justice has to be blind, and there has to be a proper application of judicial principles. In jurisprudence itself, we can look at two different sectors, and I want to split this up because we're going to be focusing more on one sector now. One is where one person has caused damage to the others. There's stole $100, broke a window, whatever it is, and there, the primary focus is to make the victim whole. If we can prove the damages, and that the perpetrator A damaged person B, irrespective of who they are, the person B sustained an illegal loss for the damages, and that hole has to be filled, so to speak. There's another element of jurisprudence, which we might call punishment, where it's not necessarily filling a hole. You could say that, let's say, talk about capital punishment, and we're going to be talking about a bit about capital punishment. Capital punishment appears in the Torah, and capital punishment, if someone, God forbid, one person murdered another person, killing the murderer doesn't bring the other person back to life. It doesn't really make the other family whole, though it may give them at least some type of solace that there was justice. And the reasons for, and I don't want, it's not going to be all about capital punishment, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. The reasons for capital punishment might be deterrence, and outside of Torah thought, it could also be, frankly, vengeance. Get the person back. That's not a Torah value, revenge, and Torah explicitly forbids that. So, but it does appear. So there, especially, and that's kind of an extreme example of justice where it's not about filling the other person's hole. It's about causing pain to a perpetrator because of something they've done. Again, we'll talk about the reasoning, and in Torah thought there was very, very, very high threshold of not only of evidence, of interrogation and warnings. It was very, very high threshold for someone to merit, to deserve capital punishment. But we're going to focus on that because it's an eye-in to an area that I wanted to discuss today. So I'm going to share the screen, and we have source notes like this. Note 1 is that this is the beginning of this week's Torah portion. It says, "You shall set up judges for yourselves in all your cities that God is giving you, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment." Okay, you're judging. The judging is obviously a judgment, but there's an emphasis here that it has to be righteous. Now, what does righteous mean? That's really where I want to go. Before we do that, take a look and say that the very idea of capital punishment was really, it didn't fit in so easily. It doesn't fit in so easily into the righteous attitude of Torah jurisprudence, at least at first blush. What are you gaining? And the Talmud tells us that a Sanhedrin is a Greek word, but it means a great court. So in the judicial system that was set up in Israel, when Israel was a commonwealth, there were, I guess we could call it, regional superior courts, which were 23 judges. A regular court is a court of 3. And then a superior court would be 23, and the great court that would decide things for the entire Jewish people, no matter where they lived, that was called the Sanhedrin. The great Sanhedrin, one was called the lower Sanhedrin, higher Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin, that was 71 sages. So we're told that a Sanhedrin that executes a transgressor once in 7 years is characterized as a destructive tribunal. So you're saying that once in 7 years is too much. Why? Because there's, and then Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said this categorization applies to a Sanhedrin that executes a transgressor once in 70 years. Now, why is that? And we're going to explore this a little bit today. Why is that? By Torah law, a capital crime, had to be a crime that was done in a very measured, not only premeditated before, but very calculated as the act is happening. By Torah law, there had to be 2 witnesses on the spot watching it, and they had to warn the perpetrator before the act, very close to the act, within a minute or so of the act, saying, and the perpetrator was not in a frenzy, perpetrator was not in an angry place where they're not going to hear anything, so that they were able to process. They will testify that the perpetrator was able to process that what he or she is about to do is wrong by Torah law, and it is a capital crime, and they could conceivably get capital punishment. And the perpetrator will process that and go ahead and do it anyway. That's a very, very rare occurrence. Aside from that, just the bar of evidence, and there was a very, very rigorous examination of the witnesses, plenty of room for them to not be able to meet the bar. In a case like that, the person would be, even if we're totally convinced. I just want to stop this. There's some background noise. I'm just going to get this here. Okay. In a case like that, where a person would not be put to death, where at the court could be convinced that there's not, that they did it, the person did it, but and therefore, if they feel that the society needs to be protected from this person, there is a concept akin to prison, not much, but it does exist, if there's something, they could do things on the perimeter, so to speak, to treat this person as someone they see from their human understanding that this person is a murderer, and they want to be able to mete out justice in the sense of anything, payments to the family or to survivors, or, as I say, protection of the rest of society, but they could not go with capital punishment. Capital punishment was a very rare occurrence. And therefore, in addressing capital punishment, and actually in addressing law in general, but especially when it came to what we call punishing someone, the Torah itself says in number 3, the congregation shall judge and the congregation shall save. Congregation means the congregation of the judge, community through the judges, the judicial system should judge and shall save. There should be a focus on trying to understand, to see mitigating exculpatory factors in a crime. Again, if you have a video of someone shooting someone, we know what happened. That video is not going to be enough for capital punishment, but and we should, again, damages done to the family. If this is a person judged to be against the society, take care of that. But the person is not going to be executed. And when we say the congregation shall save, is they should be looking to see any mitigating factors. Say, we know he just had a horrible fight with someone very close to him and ran out of the house, and he may have looked to you like he was totally sane but in the right mind, but he wasn't. Well, that's an important factor. So there are, and that could be definitely a mitigating factor, or at least that has to be discussed. And one of the things that the Talmud tells us about the congregation shall save, should look to find mitigating or exculpatory factors to consider before administering capital punishment. Maimonides writes that in number 4, according to the oral tradition, we learn that if the majority are inclined to do harm, what does it mean? They're judges, they're not harming anyone, but they're executing a defendant. You do not follow them until there's a majority of 2 judges who rule that he is guilty. So that's an interesting idea, that in Torah thinking, and the Torah says very clearly, we go by majority. And therefore, if it's a court of 23, and 12 say have one opinion, and 11 have another opinion, we follow the 12. But when it comes to administering capital punishment, that's not enough. It has to be, at least 2 above the innocent or not guilty opinion. So if it's 11 and 12, that's not going to work. If it's 10 and 13, that can work. So here we see that there's a heavy emphasis on trying to look for what we're going to call mitigating factors. We're not finding the person innocent, but the idea is of trying to get to a place of understanding of how this transpired, to say, yes, what he did was horrible, and we have to address that, but it does not rise or sink to the level of something that can deserve capital punishment. Now, if we go back to 5, the Talmud tells us that the verse we have here, a congregation shall save, in number 3, Talmud says this requires a court to search for grounds to exonerate the defendant. Again, exonerate the defendant from capital punishment. But once they have themselves seen him kill a person, they will be unable to find grounds to exonerate him. So this is a very interesting case in Jewish law. There's the idea that a judge generally should not have any personal involvement with the case at hand. Judges should be sitting in a courtroom and hearing fresh presentation of evidence and being able to arrive at their rational understanding of what went on and where it would be, where it should arrive. What happens if a judge actually witnessed what the judge is about to decide? So Mr. A, who's a judge, his honor, Mr. A, is in public or wherever it is in a certain area, and it's now and witnesses. Let's say we're talking about a capital crime. He witnesses a capital crime. He's there. So on the one hand, you could say, who better to be a judge? He knows exactly what he saw. But Torah says that a witness is not allowed to be a judge, as a general rule. Why is a witness not allowed to be a judge? Because a witness saw something. They have a perception of reality, which could be totally legit, but it's a perception of reality. And that perception is going to take up so much space in their brain that even side mitigating factors are going to have a hard time undermining the certitude that they have of exactly what they saw and exactly what they experienced. So in other words, they pretty much have a judgment before they walk into the court. That's not a judge who's considered to be able to execute, to be able to effect a righteous judgment. Doesn't mean the person's a bad person at all or a lying person. They're a human. And once they have a judgment in their minds so strong because they saw it, they can come as a witness, but they can no longer sit as a judge. And the language that we find in the Talmud is, once they themselves have seen him kill a person, they'll be unable to find grounds to exonerate him. Now, there also, it does not mean necessarily to exonerate him, because if he killed him, he killed him. But the mitigating factors that would take this out of a capital case into a regular murder case, and therefore any punishment or any effects on him are not going to be one that takes his life. We're afraid that we need the judge to be open to seeing some humanity within this person, some goodness within this person, some potential goodness within this person. And if someone, just think about ourselves, someone in a bad mood, someone who just went through something very difficult, and they walk into a room and they do something, they exercise bad behavior. You know bad behavior when you see it, and there's bad behavior. Bad behavior is bad behavior. We're not going to say that it becomes good behavior because the person had terrible stress 10 minutes before. It's not. It's bad behavior. But the bad behavior deserves a context. Because in order, before we judge the person, there's the behavior and there's the human being. And looking at the behavior and saying it's bad behavior, well, it is bad behavior. Sometimes people who aren't so bad do bad things because of different factors. Or sometimes because there are exercises, some evil in them. But the idea of mitigating factors is before we go and judge, we're about to take his life or her life. Before we judge the human being, we want to have someone able to has the ability to process mitigating factors. Again, not to deny what happened on the ground if we're certain of that, but to not to see that as defining the entire human being, because that's a different story. The act and the behavior is one thing, the human being is different. And then I spend time sometimes in penitentiaries. You can speak to people who did some really horrible things and see that parts of them are not so horrible. What they did was horrible, and their judgment was obviously horrible at that time, and they allowed their negative parts to eclipse everything else and to act negatively and do damage. That's true, and that's why there has to be judgment. But the judging of the entire human being takes a little more a sophisticated view to understand that there's context. And if I don't have context, then all I have, and I only have the behavior to judge by, then that's pretty much it. The tendency is to judge the person by the behavior. A judge, because they have to get into this to try to understand more about the person and put the behavior in proper context. So that is number 5. Now, Maimonides writes in his Laws of the Sanhedrin, that along the lines that we're speaking about now, says when all the judges of a Sanhedrin begin their judgment of a case involving capital punishment and say that the defendant is liable, he's exonerated. So here's an interesting thing. You have 71 sages. You have pretty much an open and shut case. Today's day you have a video, but in those days you had, numerous witnesses. It's quite clear. Maybe it was a public crime, so people heard about it before, even the judges. It comes before them. They all immediately said, yes, he's guilty. These and the judges of the Sanhedrin, think about it. With all due respect to today's judges, and our judicial system is wonderful and is a blessing to the world, but people are people. The judges who were selected to be of the Sanhedrin were people of extreme moral strength. We see them as people. These are not people who were subject at all, open at all to any type of bribery. They were caring people, good people. They were very, very careful about the selection. There weren't that many judges. So these people, they're sitting down to this capital case, and then and as Maimonides puts it, and he's taken from the Talmud, all the judges of the Sanhedrin begin the judgment of a case involving capital punishment, say the defendant is liable. So they sit down, they hear the accusation. Someone, an advocate for the accused, presents his case, and they look at each other and say, it's guilty. Every one of those. Imagine getting 71 Jews to agree on something. And here it's in that case, it says there must be, he's exonerated. Again, it doesn't mean he's innocent. He will not get capital punishment, even though it seems so open and shut that everybody didn't have to go through many deliberations. They heard it, and that's it. They didn't any deliberations. They all said it. They called a recess after whatever 20 minutes, for example. To say this is obvious. He did it. He did it, and he did it in a way which makes him liable to capital punishment. So Maimonides continues, why is he exonerated? There must be some who seek to exonerate him and argue on his behalf, but yet the majority hold him liable. It has to be a situation where there's some presence on the court. It says, one second. Did you hear about what the background to this is? Do you hear about his personal mental background? The person is not mentally stable. That's horrible, but that's not a person for capital punishment. There has to be at least somebody on the court that says, one second. What happened, we know. But this is not a capital case. This is not a capital punishment case, because there's an element here. He's not as black as in its entirety as you see him. And that's the only time we'll allow for there to be capital punishment. If there is not that, there's no capital punishment. Now, so that may sound nice and feel good. The question is, what does that do with law? If law is about, if a judicial system is about adjudicating and coming to the truth, and all 71 sages say clearly he did this in a way, in a horrible way, in a premeditated way, in a cold and calculated way, in front of witnesses, and he was warned, and all of that, the facts are the facts. Why should it be that without that one person coming up with something, say that it's not a capital punishment case? It should be more of a capital punishment case because it's unanimous. So one of the classical Talmudic commentaries from the 1800s, Tzvi, he notes, he says, number 7, the fact that this court immediately went to a guilty opinion without considering any mitigating or exculpatory factor indicates that this isn't a properly proficient court. They may have jumped to a conclusion without proper consideration. Okay, so this Rabbi Tzvi was a great Talmudic genius. He takes an avenue and says, you know something? We really respect the judges. We're very selective about high-minded and judicially focused and caring people as judges, as wise people as judges. These people didn't do their job. This seems so open and shut, they jumped to a conclusion. If all 71 came to that, without going through a process of hearing anything, one of them at least saying, offering something mitigating, that means they're human, and they skimmed the surface. They didn't delve deeply enough, and that's why the Talmud tells us you're not going to put someone to death based on a cursory assessment, which we believe is cursory. If no one was able to come up with anything exculpatory, given the way we look at the system, there's so many different ways where we can find something exculpatory to try to understand how the person got here. It could include how they were raised. I mean, there are certain things to try to understand that where this is coming from, to be able to have it as a factor to decide, to weigh here. So that's a tzvichais. Another way of looking at this, and back to the source notes. It's another way of looking at this. And this is really an analysis.
Yeah, so I spoke to him last night at 1:30 in the morning. I woke him up.
One second.
I told you about that. Yeah, and then this morning I spoke to him again.
Okay, sorry about that. So in the source notes, let's say in number 8, there's a philosophical book which is pretty famous in Jewish life and Jewish scholarship. It's known as the Kuzari. The Kuzari is were as a people, the Khazars, who lived probably somewhere around 1,000 years ago, and historically this entire nation became Jews. They were in the Middle East, or Georgia, and they all converted to Judaism. That we know. There is a book which may be true or maybe just kind of a fictional representation to try and bring along historical philosophical ideas. We're not 100% sure, but about a rabbi who met their leader and discussed the philosophical finer points of Judaism. And so it's a book of philosophy about Judaism. And it's framed in this conversation between a rabbi and the leader of the Khazars. The Khazars, that's Kuzari. Kuzari is the people. So one of the things that the rabbi tells the leader of the Kuzari is the trials which meet us are meant to prove our faith, to cleanse us completely, and to remove all taint from us. Let me get to this, which is it's a delicate philosophical point. In Torah thinking, we're alive with souls, thank God, and we're living lives in a world which is a bit of that God gave us. It's a bit of an obstacle course in the things that we have to deal with, the situations we have to respond to, and the personalities which we have. We've got it doesn't being good doesn't come so easy. And our goal is for soul strength and soul purity, soul, S-O-U-L, purity. And when we make a mistake, if, God forbid, this afternoon I say something which offends someone, what I've done is I've hurt them, but I've hurt me. I've tainted, I've blemished my soul. It's a blemish. And the way for me to rectify that is I have an afternoon service, and I'm thinking about my day from between the morning service and the afternoon service, and I'll say to myself, I can't believe, you know something? I think what I said, I meant it as a joke, but I think it offended. I really feel badly about that. I'm going to call that person and apologize. And I'm going to search myself to see, to make sure I grow from this. So, excuse me, someone asked a question. Okay, I want to get back to this. This is more about the judges. I'm sorry, I just saw it now, so I'll move on. I moved on. So this idea of cleansing, with that, if I address my own mistake, my own inner smudge, so to speak, I cleanse my soul. God tells us, Torah tells us, also Torah thought tells us that sometimes aggravation in life also cleanses us. That God sends us situations and with aggravation, and that aggravation, since usually when I've done something wrong, it's out of some type of personal need, or even if it's not pleasure per se, this is what made me feel like I'm more comfortable, or I'm unloading whatever I was doing, searching for some self-serving need, and that which ended up hurting someone else. So the idea of aggravation of myself helps to cleanse that. Obviously, it has to be a conscious reflection and so on. But as far as and learning from it, but the idea is that the trials we have in life, as he put it, they cleanse. So let's go back to that a second. In number 8, the trials which meet us. Trials means the challenges we have are meant to prove our faith. So first of all, as a believing person, it's easy to believe in God when everything seems to be working well. I say, thank you, God, I like you. What happens when I think that I've been doing everything right, and all of a sudden it's not working for me? So I might say, where are you, God? And say, I don't trust you anymore. I don't feel safe with you. So if I truly feel safe and trust God, then even the trials will not weaken my faith and weaken my trust, but I will trust that this is something I can move through, and that God has not abandoned me, that God is with me in this struggle. And sometimes you can feel even closer to God in the midst of trials. But it's a test. And to cleanse us completely and to remove all taint from us, which was what I said before, is to cleanse spiritual toxins. Along those lines is the Proverbs tells us, for God chastens the one he loves as a parent guides a child. God disciplines. Now, it's something, if one of my children has done something where I feel I need to show them discipline, that this is not okay, and I want to teach it to them. Obviously, I want to do it in a caring way. I can't be angry when I do that. That'll undermine everything. But while I would like to be one who's just only giving and loving and showing kindness, sometimes you have to say, as your parent, as your dad, you really should do better. It's okay. That helps, hopefully. It's not about me unloading, it's about helping the child. And for God, it's not about unloading. We sort of said before that we don't believe in revenge. We don't believe in a God who takes revenge on us. And who takes revenge? Revenge is personal. But I have a God who guides me. And sometimes I need the guidance of something which isn't so pleasant. So I hope and I ask God for, easier lessons and palatable ones, but sometimes I have to learn from life. And the Talmud actually uses the language. This teaches that God afflicts the one in whom he delights. The Talmud tells us that sometimes the struggles are an expression of God's love for us, because we need that. We need the cleansing. We need the growth. Again, God loves me. When I pray, I say, don't give me these problems. I have enough on my plate. You want to teach me something? You want to cleanse me? You're God. You know how to do it in a way that is manageable and painless and pleasant. At the same time, when something is not pleasant, I can recognize that this is something that it's part of my soul journey. Somebody asked something now. Okay, so the God not taking revenge is someone just says about how that squares with Noah's flood. The Torah, the axiom is that God does not take revenge. The word revenge is used in the Torah for God. The Torah itself seems almost self-contradictory. I don't want to make this all about that, so maybe we can make it for another Sunday. But just I can't not allow that not to be answered, at least at some level. The Torah itself says, as one of 613 commandments, there are 365 prohibitions, and one of them is not to take revenge. So, and that same Torah describes God as vengeful, which is kind of ridiculous. It's do as I say, not as I do. And therefore, the idea, the approach of Jewish philosophy and Jewish spirituality is that when the Torah describes God as vengeful, it's saying that to a human, it can look vengeful, but vengeful means when you take revenge, if someone takes revenge, what do you mean? If someone really hurt them, and now you want to get them back. You want to get them back. You want to cause them pain. You want to make your point. It's getting very personal. It's not clinical. It's not a high-minded analytical judgment. It's very, very personal. It's not for the mature human persona. You can understand it more of kids on a playground because they haven't evolved enough. If someone has hurt me and I need to respond, I need to take a step back, wait till the pain subsides and figure out what do I want to accomplish and the best way to accomplish it. I want to undo the damage they did. I want to send them a lesson to see is that worth it, but I want to do it in a much more calculated, calm place, and so that it doesn't feel like the bite of revenge. It could be a response, but revenge means I'm going to get you back. We don't believe in that. And the idea that people, even in the times of Noah, they hurt God and they got to him, and now he wanted to get them back. That's lowering God to think that we can do anything to actually get to him, and that God got them back. Even there, the Jewish spirituality talks about God saying that the earth was so corrupt that the only way he could address it, because people had become so wrapped up in the corruption and closed to self-betterment, was to wipe them out. And in the language, again, of Jewish spirituality, there were 40 days, we say, of the heavy rains. And in Jewish law, a mikveh, which is meant to cleanse, to purify the one who goes into the mikveh, the classic halachic idea is that it takes 40 sa'ah, which is a measurement of water in a mikveh, and that cleanses. So Jewish spirituality writes, and the founder of Chabad, Rabbi Zalman, brings this in a discourse, that the 40 days of torrential rain were 40 measurements of water in a mikveh. The water came to cleanse humanity and to cleanse the earth. Now, you could say cleanse humanity, they're dead. But if we believe in the soul, and we believe in, and this is on point for today, but we'll get to it soon. If a person, if a person lived a corrupt life and a life that hurt people, and the death cleanses their soul so that they can go on to eternal life. Well, it's to us on the human end, you say, well, life's over, but the life isn't over, and the soul continues. So, this death cleansed their soul. So, in the scope of that soul's existence, it was a kindness. It cleansed the soul to be able to move forward without the blemishes they brought upon themselves during their lifetime. But again, I don't know if that hit the spot with you. We can talk about it more hopefully in future weeks. But here we're talking about, and we are going to actually, this point is going to come up again. Here's another chat. Oh, okay. I guess it hit the point. So in this, what the Torah is saying is that the punishment itself is not punitive. We talk about rehabilitative. Rehabilitative, if you think about rehabilitative, means that now, someone has become a better human being. We'd hope for that. But then there's on the soul level, which we don't always see in the human condition. And this, we have the Talmud talks about someone named Achan. Achan was a guy, when Joshua entered the land with the Jewish people, and they attacked Jericho. Remember, they surrounded Jericho, and they blew a shofar, and the walls fell down. And at that time, Joshua said, "Do not take any plunder, nothing. We'll take the city. Nobody should take anything for themselves. If there's anything that needs to be taken, it'll go for the temple, for God, whatever." And this guy Achan, he liked what he saw, so he took some of the wealth. And God told Joshua, someone did it, took, and finally Joshua located that it was Achan. And Achan answered, "Joshua, indeed I've sinned against God." That's a verse. What does the Talmud tell us? And I'm cutting it short here in what I took from the Talmud. It says, and the Talmud asks, from where is it derived that Achan's confession achieved atonement for him? How do we know that when he confessed, he cleansed himself, he achieved atonement? It is derived from here, as it is stated. Joshua said, "Why have you brought trouble on us? The Lord shall trouble you this day." This day. Joshua said to Achan, "On this day of your judgment you are troubled, but you will not be troubled in the world to come." He's telling this person who did something wrong, who did something very wrong, and affected the Jewish people on a national level. He said, "You're going to be punished now, but now you're being punished, but you will not be troubled in the world to come. It's going to cleanse your soul going forward." Okay, so having said that, let's take a look at, and I hope this isn't, I hope we can stay on point with this. Another area of Jewish law and jurisprudence. There's something about false witnesses, but there's something that's like it's a Torah prescribed process, specific situation of false witnesses. What is the case? The case is, let's say two people come along and they go before a court, and they testify that this guy Abraham killed that guy Yankel, and they have what seems to be totally legitimate testimony. Now, two other people, and what did they say? That this Abraham killed the uncle on Tuesday morning at 9:00 in Los Angeles. Two other witnesses come along, and they say, "1 second, We don't know anything about Abraham and Yankel. We can tell you, though, that these witnesses on Tuesday at 9 a.m., they're with us in New York. This is it's impossible. The story is impossible, especially back then, right? There was no Zoom and there was no airplanes. It's just not possible. Again, they're not negating the facts of the case. They're just saying these people were not there. So what does the Torah say? The Torah says like this: the judges shall inquire thoroughly, and behold, the witness is a false witness. So they go back to the first of witnesses, and when it turns out that yes, indeed, they were not there, they were conspiring to get this guy Abraham killed by the court. And you say that each witness is the witness of false witness has testified falsely against his brother. Then you shall do to him as he plotted to his brother. So there, the Torah says, we punish the witness, the false witness, with the punishment he tried to get meted out on this innocent person that they were setting up, framing. Right, so two witnesses are trying to frame Abraham, and it will be a capital punishment case. It doesn't only apply to a capital punishment case, but we're talking about here a capital punishment case. And in other words, so he would be killed, and they make their testimony. Two other people come along and say you weren't even there. Those two witnesses, they get the capital punishment, the type of whatever they were trying to get meted out to Abraham, they get. Now, the Talmud comes along and says in 13, Talmud, it says as he plotted, but not as he actually did. So here's a really interesting thing. Talmud says there that it's only if they were trying to get him killed. What if these two people came along, they testified in front of the Sanhedrin that Abraham killed Yankel. They passed with flying colors. They said everything they needed to say, and the court executed Abraham. And the next day, two people come running into court breathless, and they say, "1 second, these guys, did you see what happened with Abraham? They said it happened Tuesday 9 o'clock in L.A. They were with us in New York Tuesday 9 o'clock. They couldn't have been there." Right. So it's not only that they plotted to kill Abraham, they actually got him. They killed him. They killed him through the court. The court killed him because they manipulated the court. And they lied. So you think, that's even worse. The crime was actually perpetrated. Yet the Jewish law tells us, and this kind of defies the rationale, in that case, since the Torah says it's about in a case where they plotted, it says they plotted, but not as they actually did. So then, yes, we're going to address these false witnesses. We're going to, they're going to have to make restitution to the victim's family, all of those things. But you're not going to give them this biblical formula of do to them what they wanted to do to him does not apply. It's because only if they wanted to, they plotted to do it. If they were successful, it doesn't happen. But why not? It defies rationale. So there's, in 14, we have a man named Rabbi Yosef Karo. Rabbi Yosef Karo was a great Sephardic leader. And he is the author of what we call the Shulchan Aruch, that's honored and respected by Jews all over the world, the Code of Jewish Law. He writes from a Sephardic perspective. He authored the Code of the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. In there's a gloss with Ashkenazic perspectives on Jewish law by someone else, or Moshe Isserlis, but the author of Shulchan Aruch is Rabbi Yosef Karo. This is in a book he has Kesef Mishnah. This is his commentary on Maimonides, but he's a very, very powerful legalistic and also a Kabbalistic authority. So he says here, our tradition is that we do not mete out punishment based on a priori reasoning. A priori reasoning, it means to say, if you do it in this case, you definitely do it in this case. So if you kill the guy, these witnesses for trying to kill Abraham, you definitely kill him if they actually killed Abraham. That's what normal people, that's logic. There's if for something at level 1 in severity gets this punishment, well, if it's level 2 in severity, you get even more of a punishment, but at least this. But we don't give out punishment that way. Why not? We're not denying the logic. It says one might explain the reasoning. The reasoning, before we'll go back to Yosef Karo, his reasoning, what does he explains? Why don't we give up punishment based on a priori reason? Said, there's biblically prescribed punishments, because the punishments are meant to cleanse the soul. We can't see a soul and we don't know what cleanses it. So if there's something, we can't apply punishments. If it's about making the guy suffer, kill him twice. I mean, what are you gonna do? But if it's about some type of vengeance or ridding the world of a danger, of course you kill him. But once we say that punishments are about cleansing the soul, how do I know it cleanses the soul? The Torah tells me that if two people try to have someone killed by a court, by false testimony, then their soul is cleansed through getting that the punishment they wanted to give to the other guy. So I know Torah says that cleanses their soul. Maybe, but who says that it cleanses the soul of someone who was actually successful? Maybe they even killing them is not going to cleanse their soul. Maybe they need some other kind of cleanser. We don't know. And if we don't know, how can we give the capital punishment? So what he says here is, our traditions that we do not meet up punishment based on our prior reasoning, and one might explain that the travesty they have committed is beyond the cleansing that can be affected by the court and must be left for God after their deaths. Cleansing a soul is God's business. So therefore, even though we have to address in the human condition, whatever we have, they have to use their intellect, to be able to logic, to be able to address the travesty they have committed and try to make it better for the survivors and all of that. We can't give that punishment. So now, the final point of all this is that this applies, and it's getting a little late, but we want to apply this also to the idea of someone who came before the court and all 71 said is guilty. If the capital punishment is meant to cleanse this soul, there's something missing in the cleansing process. What's missing in the cleansing process is someone seeing his humanity. You can kill him. If that's what Torah says, we'll kill him. But we can't do it unless someone has mentioned something exculpatory to say he's not all black. So let's take a look at the sources here. Maimonides talks about in the laws of divorce. And Maimonides is not, his laws are his laws. It's not a law of thought and feel-goodisms and so on. It's laws. Divorce is very serious. God forbid it be necessary. It's one of the mitzvahs when it's necessary, but it's a very serious situation, and we take it very seriously. And one of the things about divorce is that it has to be done willingly by both sides, and therefore that has to be it has to be done. But sometimes we see it's necessary. And if what if a man doesn't want to give his wife a divorce because it's initiated in Jewish law by the male, so the court sees it's necessary, and he doesn't want to. So look what Maimonides says: when a man whom the law requires to divorce his wife refuses to divorce her, the court should force him until he consents. So we just said it has to be voluntary. Again, Maimonides says, but you force him to give her a get. Well, then it's not voluntary. But it's a game. And yet the get is acceptable. And then he asks, in the law, so why is this get not? It makes no sense. I told you earlier on, this is chapter 2. In chapter 1, I already said that one of the underpinnings that has to be volitional. So he writes something here which he brings in. It's a Jewish perspective, a Torah perspective of soul and spirit, but he's applying it to law. He says, regard to the person who outwardly refuses to divorce his wife, he is a guy inside, he wants to be part of the Jewish people. He wants to do the right thing. He doesn't look like it, but I'm telling you, Torah says that's what the soul wants. And to perform all the mitzvahs and eschew all the kind of transgressions. It only is evil inclination that presses. So this is someone who's angry. He's resentful. He's trying to get revenge, whatever it is. So what you're seeing is his ugly side. But inside, if he's calm and truly connected with what he wants to do the right thing. Therefore, when he's forced until his evil inclination has been weakened and he consents, he's considered to have performed the divorce willfully. So Mendy says something which really, for us, on the user end, we don't see it. He's saying what you're doing by forcing him is cutting through the resentment and the anger and the weakness of him. And you're allowing his soul to actually do what it wants to do, which is to grant a divorce. Even though the guy's screaming, I don't want to do it. So what Mendy is saying is that there is, even when a person doesn't see it in themselves, there is a part of us who wants to remain whole with God and whole with our people, always. Number 16, it said the Talmud says a Jew, although the individual has sinned, is still a Jew. And we've had some Jews do some really horrible stuff to other Jews, to the world. And the behavior is the behavior. And we can't whitewash it. But inside, they're still who they are. They're still our brother or our sister. And it speak to a parent whose child, I actually just had a situation this week, whose child has done something that is the behavior is despicable and hurts, and you want to protect society from them, but the parent knows that the child is it's better than that. It was because of this reason, that reason, and his appetite, or whatever it was. But they see that the pure child still within this human being who's done things wrong, and it's not only they're blinded by the fact that it's their child. There is truth to it. It's just you have to judge the behavior. But the idea that there's still that purity inside is a true idea. So here the Rebbe writes about this. It says, when can a capital response to murder be appropriately exercised? We said 71 sages said immediately guilty. It can't be exercised. Why? It's only if some case for exoneration is considered. It's only if someone amongst them says, but there's a purity here. There's something here. There's something that pushed him in this direction. It wasn't he wasn't right thinking. This consequence can only have its necessary cleansing effect when it connects with the innocence, the inner good within the accused. If all the judges only see guilt, this would be an exercise in punishment, not cleansing. Sorry, I mistyped that. He's saying that's an essential part of the whole judgment thing. There has to be someone there bringing up that this is a human being with purity. Fine, that's 1 out of 70, and therefore he's executed. That's the law. Nothing we can do about it. But at least someone brought the awareness that beneath those behaviors, there's a whole human being who has suffered so much and acts so much not like the whole human being. And here that ever concluded in our generation, our own interactions with others, we need to remember when we meet or know someone of whom even the Sanhedrin would not be able to find exculpating factors. You know someone, you say their behavior is despicable. I don't want to go to lunch with them. I don't want anything to do with them. That's fair. Because you don't like the behaviors. You don't want to subject yourself to abuse. But recognize that you're judging behaviors and you don't have the vision to be able to judge the entirety of the human being. Torah tells us it can't be the reality that they're totally black. Deep inside, the person has a soul and wants to lead a proper life. And so and this, while we're not judges, we all make judgments. And the Torah is leading us in that direction to understand that while we do have to protect ourselves, we have to protect society, and we have to judge the behaviors, and some people should not be allowed on the streets. All of that's true, but even that person who's not allowed on the streets, if you visit them in prison, there's a human being inside them, and maybe they have to be in prison for life. But there's a human being inside there, and that human being has a soul, which also needs nurture. All right, so if there are any questions, you can do those. If not, I think next weekend is Labor Day weekend. I think we'll leave it for Labor Day weekend. People are away. They're away this week. They'll be away the next week, and we'll pick it up the following week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Be well.
Thank you.
Be well.
Thank you.